So the next example, and I'm going to go through this more quickly, and this is the pilot project that we were successful in getting certified. This is another project that had been built and completed and occupied prior to the site's tool. And so this is one where we needed to go back and document compliance with enough of the credits, all the prerequisites, enough of the credits to get certification. And that was challenging because it was an older project. A lot of the records, we don't keep our files for more than 7 or 8 years, and so we did have files on this, but they weren't complete. And some of the other consultants that were part of the team had moved, and the people that worked on those projects were gone, and so it was kind of hard, even after only 13. It was 13 years when we started to recreate all that information. It turned out to be more of a challenge than I even expected that it would. This is the project. It's a site in Burr Ridge, and it's a corporate office and headquarters and training facility for the Tuthill Corporation, which is a company that makes highly specialized pumps and pump parts and pumping systems for different processes. And so they had established a collaborative approach and sort of philosophy within their office that it was called a conscious company, and it's a version of basically empowering people that work there to do more and to be more self-autonomous and to be inspired to contribute more and to improve their performance and productivity, but also to be more fulfilled personally. And so this was something, as a conscious company, that started their search for a green facility, and that's why they chose to do. And this actually predated the LEED program as well. But that was the kind of facility. We used an integrated design process because that was the only way to achieve a green building and green site. And one of the things that, as we first looked at this, they had, before buying the property, they basically looked to see if they could fit their amount of space that they wanted on it. And you can see it's a slope down to this wetland pond, and the upper portions of the slope are the best places for a building. And they did their initial sort of assessment and got into contract to buy the property before we actually did get involved, although we went out shortly thereafter. And they originally were thinking of building more over in this area. And the regulated landscape was the wetland. But as it turned out, they had were unaware of a remnant prairie, very high quality, very diverse, somewhat degraded, but very high on a floristic quality standpoint, remnant prairie that they didn't know even existed there. And so we said, well, you can't build here because this is the only piece of real Illinois you have on your entire site. So we need to work this into the plan, and actually through back and forth with the architect and the owner and others, came up with the plan actually to build on the slope on the northern side and actually reduce the footprint of the overall project by tucking some of the parking underneath the building and stepping the grade. And actually it reduced mass grading, reduced paving, and provided a climate-controlled portion of their site for parking, which was an amenity, and actually saved on cost over what it would have been to do it as surface parking and as structured parking within the building. And so that was, here you can see how it turned out on the site, and here's the site plan. Now I mentioned before the VSPZ, or the Vegetation Soil Protection Zone. These are some diagrams that we put together for demonstrating compliance with a number of the credits, including not building in the wetlands. Although we did have one little incursion, which you can see that boardwalk, and part of the idea was to actually get down and intimate with the water, and the only way to do that was to cross that wetland fringe. Although, and this was part of the demonstration or the documentation, this entire shoreline was completely degraded. It was all just cattails, and in fact mowed down well into the wetland, just as mowed turf. just to keep the vegetation down. And this was former ag land, although it had pretty much been surrounded by development. It was kind of vacant and left dilapidated for many years before it was bought for this. So we showed that basically through our managing rainwater uphill and using a combination of infiltration strategies that we were no longer discharging any surface water to the low point, to this wetland pond, and actually restored that whole shoreline and greatly improved the aquatic habitat and overall plant diversity. And so it was through that demonstration that we were able to document that we were meeting the intent of that credit of not building in the wetland, even though and it does allow for things like boardwalks and paths for a very small amount to do exactly what we did here, which is to improve visual and physical access to that natural landscape. So this was actually before, and you can that's the degraded shoreline. You can see the silt fence was put up. This was just as the project was being built, and here you can see this is down into the wetland, and this had just been kept this way. They had cattails and invasives along the shoreline, and mowed. And let's see if I've got a few after shots, but it's dramatically improved over that condition, and we were able to demonstrate that in part because we did a detailed floristic inventory as part of our initial assessment, and then measured against that. We actually did a number of post-occupancy floristic assessments as part of the management tool for this. We were also involved in the stewardship, basically maintaining the naturalized landscape here and recommending and doing controlled burning, selective weed removal, and some other things to continue to improve that restored landscape, both the remnant prairie as well as the rest of pretty much the entire site that wasn't building or the pavement was restored as naturalized landscape. And that equates to a different sort of management protocol than a more typical ornamental landscape, and that was all specified up front and maintained over time. And a critical part of that, as I mentioned, was controlled burning, and that was a huge education process for this client. I mean, they were interested in what we were talking about, but had not seen this kind of landscape management on a corporate office site, and it was only because we had done it in a few other places. Now it's becoming much more commonplace, although still not exactly typical. But that was something that they learned about, and the more that they saw the results of this natural area management and how that related to reduced weeds, more diverse native species, seeing increase in wildlife coming up to the site. They made the connection between if we do these things, we get these results. And it's really, you go out there, it's like working in a nature preserve. I mean, the number of different things that you see, the change of the seasons and all that, it's pretty remarkable for a corporate office site. This is just some of the data that we provided from our floristic assessment. And part of it, we had to do this assessment for, there were some wetland impacts that were regulated through the DuPage County Department of the Environment. And so we needed to get a permit, and in order to show compliance with that permit, we needed to show that those the restored wetlands that were part of addressing the impacts were being managed. And these are some of the critters that come up right up next to the building and are part of the landscape different times of the year. And there is our certification. And then the last point I'll mention here, I know we're about out of time, is again emphasizing the amount of resources and support that the sites program provides. And this is some of the information that came with the certificate. And so the project is publicized. They have guidelines for how to use site certification as part of your publicity and branding and community outreach. and it gets incorporated into a database of other certified projects. And so if part of your objective is to raise awareness or improve visibility on the sustainability of a particular project, whether it's a public project, a park or a streetscape, or in this case an office or a hospital or a school, then there's a lot of benefits that go along with documenting that you've actually achieved these different things.